It is a beautiful day here, and I'm just out enjoying the weather. And as I do so, I can't help but think about a young man named Mahmoud Khalil who is not able to enjoy the weather at present because over the weekend he was arrested by ICE agents and taken from his home in New York and away from his wife, who is 8 months pregnant, and taken, at last report, to an ICE detention facility in Louisiana. Mahmoud Khalil is here in this country legally. He is of Palestinian heritage. He immigrated here, but he's here legally. And in fact, he is a green card holder. Given all those facts, you might be wondering, if you don't know about this story already, why did ICE arrest Mahmoud Khalil and take him away? Well, because Mahmoud Khalil was, until recently, a student at Columbia University. He has since graduated from Columbia, but while he was a student at Columbia, he was one of the leaders of student protests against the Israeli government's genocidal operations in the Gaza Strip. And he has been arrested and had his green card revoked, or at least the State Department is threatening to revoke his green card. Whether or not they're actually legally able to just revoke it, or whether they need to go through a judicial process in order to have it revoked, is currently the subject of some dispute. But nonetheless, this action has been taken because, due to his participation and his leading role in the pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza, anti-genocide protests on the campus of Columbia University, he has been determined to be pro-Hamas. And because he's been determined to be pro-Hamas, that means that they have a right to revoke his green card, because you can have your green card revoked in the United States if you are found to be supporting terrorism. One of the difficulties in protesting the actions of the Israeli government is that no matter what the basis of your protest, there will always be people who will accuse you of being anti-Semitic. And in the case of the campus protests against the war in Palestine, there are definitely gray areas. There are definitely blurred lines. There have definitely been times when those protests, or certain isolated elements of those protests, have crossed a line from legitimate protest into illegitimate protest and into anti-Semitism. But legitimate criticism of the state of Israel, of the government of Israel, must be possible. We must allow that can exist. And if protesting what the government of Israel and the military of Israel has been doing to the people of Gaza does not count as legitimate protest, or cannot be considered legitimate protest, then I don't think legitimate protest against Israel does exist. And never mind what Mahmoud Khalil may or may not have actually done, I'm not aware of anything to date that he has been accused of that would justify how he's been treated by ICE, that would justify him being arrested and detained and potentially deported, having his green card revoked. He was part of a student protest against the genocide in Palestine, in Gaza. He is accused of being a supporter of Hamas. Now, if he is being accused of being a supporter of Hamas simply because he has protested against Israel and in favor of the Palestinians in Gaza, that in and of itself is incredibly problematic, because being on the side of the Palestinian people who have been the targets of the Israeli government's war in Gaza is not the same thing as supporting Hamas and approving of the acts of terrorism that Hamas has committed. Those are two separate things. But let's think about this. Even if Mahmoud Khalil is and has been explicitly pro-Hamas, and I'm not saying he has been, I don't know if he has been, I don't think he has been, but even if he has been, being pro-Hamas, voicing support for Hamas, saying Hamas is in the right in this fight, however you feel about that, however distasteful you may find that position, and I have made it clear in the past when I have spoken on this matter, I have no sympathy for Hamas. I am not pro-Hamas in any stretch of the imagination, but no matter how distasteful you find that idea of someone expressing support, not just for the people of Gaza, but specifically for Hamas, does that by itself justify getting rid of someone from this country? Does just saying, I support Hamas, and expressing that opinion at a protest, does that by itself justify having your legal residency status revoked and being deported from this country? I would argue that it doesn't. Whether you agree or disagree with that position relative to Hamas, just saying I support Hamas should not be enough to get you kicked out of the country. Now, if they can find that he was offering some kind of material support, that he was aiding Hamas in some way other than just being part of a protest that he organized or helped to organize and saying, I support Hamas against the government of Israel, if there's something more to it than that, okay, that's a different conversation. But at the moment, all we have is he was a leading figure in a campus protest, and according to us, that makes him pro-Hamas. And on that basis, we're kicking him out of the country. That doesn't seem fair. We are taught in this country to cherish our freedom of speech, protecting free speech, fighting for the free speech of others. That's we're told that's one of the pillars of the United States. And for a very long time now, we have all heard people on the right use that freedom of speech as a shield to protect themselves when they have said, and in some cases done, the most atrocious things, the most offensive things. Nazis marching openly in the streets of American towns. You might not like it, but there's nothing we can do about it. Freedom of speech. Bigots expressing the most outrageous and awful and contemptible opinions about people of color and immigrants and queer people, and you name it. Well, you know, you might find it offensive and you might not agree with it, but they have the right to say it. It's freedom of speech. People denying service to customers because they say their own personal religious beliefs gives them that right. You might not enjoy it, you might not agree with it, but freedom of religion, which is just another way of saying freedom of speech. And yet, somehow, a campus protest against the Israeli government's genocide in Gaza, according to many of those same people on the right who call themselves champions of free speech, somehow that campus protest in favor of the people of Palestine and against the government of Israel, that's not covered by free speech. If you are a leader of one of those protests, then apparently you can be arrested and taken hundreds of miles from your home and locked indefinitely in a detention facility and kicked out of the country. That's not freedom of speech, I guess. We tell ourselves, and we tell anyone else who will listen all around the world, how much we value freedom of speech here in this country. And you know what we say, and I've heard this so many times from so many people on the left and people on the right. Right libertarians, lawyers for the ACLU, everybody in between. They say freedom of speech isn't just freedom for the thought that you love. It's freedom for the thought that you hate the most. That's what freedom of speech means. And we've told each other that over and over. And we've told everybody else all around the world that that's what we believe here in the United States. We believe in freedom of speech. And Mahmoud Khalil's biggest mistake was taking us at our word.